I've always liked airships as far back as I can remember, and I like making films of them too, like when I went for a flight on the Goodyear blimp in 2011, and a little film I made in 2008 called Howden's Airship, the R100. But I've always wanted to make a film on the R100 sister ship, the R101, and therein lies a problem. You see, model airships aren't the easiest things to get hold of, and the scale is usually pretty small. I hit lucky when I did Howden's Airship at the Yorkshire Air Museum in Elvington, as they had a huge model of the R100 on display at the time. However, even this model now is in a large glass case, and not only that, it's not the right ship for what I want to work on this time. So, not being able to get a model, I turned to this book, Airships Cardington, with a picture of the ship I wanted to do on the cover. Inside, at the back, just what was required to build a scratch-built model of the R101. Once the plan was sourced, it was scanned, enlarged, printed out on about 8 sheets of A4 and used to go from this to this. And here she is in her not quite finished glory, a 42-inch model representation of the R101 in her final form, with one or two novel features. As she's a film model, I wanted the engines to run, which, as you can probably hear them, and as it was a night time when she crashed, some internal illumination. The motors were sourced for the engine cars, and as you can see, they work rather well. The engine cars are slightly oversized because of this. The internal illumination is with 3 LEDs, and the battery box for all this is kept in the tail of the ship. The covering that goes over it was always envisaged to hide it, just in case you wanted to show this side of the ship. You didn't want to show a gaping hole in the tail where the battery box was. Also, because the model has been made as a film model, I wanted to be able to fit it to a stand if necessary, so the model could be held rigid while you're doing special effects shots like flying through cloud and things like that. So that slot, which I just demonstrated with shoving a screwdriver in it, was basically so it can be fitted to a stand. Then all the battery box just slots back on, and Bob's your auntie after the sex change. So here's the plans we started with, and the first part I built was the tail. This set the precedent to how the model was going to be built, very much like the original ship was, with the rings with a light covering, in this case balsa. The fins were made of 1/4 inch balsa and shaped. These were then added into a whole tail unit, the battery door added, and strengthened, because strengthening was going to be needed, it was going to be handled. The unit was to fit onto a central girder, with which the rings were to be put on, each ring corresponding to a ring on the original ship. The rings themselves were made out of 2 4-inch planks of balsa, 4-inch wide, glued together to make the correct diameter. These had a photocopy of either the fore or aft rings placed on them. Once this was placed on and glued into place with double-sided sticky tape, they were then cut out and the central hole for the girder cut out, and finally each one of 30 grooves put in so that the longerons could then go into place. Then began the work of stringing each one of these on. The tail was fixed on, and that was an early picture of the nose before we changed it and made it into 15 separate fins. As the model came together, the shape of the R101 really began to shine through. We've got the engine cars fixed on there, but we'll come into those in a minute. And there the ballroom floor is already in, and here you can see the ballroom fitted in. This was to be illuminated, and here we can see the engine pods, which were fitments that went on later, the gondola, control gondola before it was finished, the engine pods, which were cut out of this block tube that was made out of 4 separate pieces of balsa. These were then widened and fitted on. The struts holding them on was actually bamboo stays. once all the longerons were in place, we had to fit the panels. These were marked out by shining a bright light through the model to mark each panel out, which the big fault on the model is that those panels were a bit thin, which didn't become apparent at the time, and I let myself off because this is really the first time I've ever used balsa models, made a balsa model. So I made plastic kits before, but hundreds of them, but this is the first time I've done this. Once all the skinning was going on, longerons on, and we'd got all the skin nearly all on, the nose then needed skinning, which was a bit of a pain in the backside, to put it blunt, and gratuitous use of elastic bands and pins to hold the various panels down, and using the wood grains so it would form easier over the nose formers. Now these little vents were all over the R101. She had a line of double ones down the spine, as can be seen by the next shot, and a ring of vents around frame 7. These were just lumps of balsa and then rubbed down in situ once the glue had set. The first attempt of applying paint was a bit of a failure and ended up with a lot of rubbing down and a lot of filler, which made for a lot of work. However, we persevered and eventually got a reasonable finish on the model. It's not brilliant, but not bad for making my first model out of wood. As for the codes and markings, these were made out of stencils, which I designed the letters myself on the PC, and applied these by putting an outline in and then hand painting them in, and this seems to work well, and you can see these line of vents around frame 7 there. And here she is in a nearly finished glory. Still got a few bits of painting and finishing touches to do. And now we're working on the mooring mast, which of course will be used in the filming of the video. Hopefully that's not going to be much longer before we're filming that. So till then, we'll see you then.